What's the scariest gut feeling you had that came true? I gave birth in November to a baby girl. She hardly moved at all in utero. When I told my doctors, they all said that every pregnancy is different, so I tried to put my worries to bed. We had a completely normal pregnancy and totally normal tests, no indication of trouble. Then she was born. The second she opened her eyes for the first time, I got a horrible, sinking feeling in my gut. We were still in the delivery room. There were pictures taken, and in each one, I looked scared. There were immediate problems. She didn't latch, she had no reflexes, etc. I shoved all my worries down. She's just born a few weeks early. Everyone kept saying bottle feed her and she'll perk up once she gets closer to her due date. Every nurse, every doctor, every lactation consultant told us the same thing. We were released from the hospital with a healthy baby. But I knew. I knew the moment I looked into her eyes. A week later, we were back in the NICU because she was still lethargic. It turns out she was basically brain dead the entire time. The diagnosis was Ohtahara syndrome, a fatal epilepsy disorder of infancy. We have no family history of seizures, so it was a complete surprise, medically speaking. We took her home from the hospital, and she passed away in our arms at 16 days old. In this situation, it was both listening and not listening to my gut. I didn't listen to my gut when it said, "Don't get into the car with this person you've just met." Well, that went to shit. He kidnapped me, drove me to a forest, and tried to drag me out. My gut said to calm down and be nice to him. I basically talked my way out of the situation by stroking his ego. I was able to convince him that he didn't need to do this and that I'd be his. But he needed to let me go because my friend was waiting for me, and if I didn't show up soon, maybe we couldn't be together. This guy was crazy, but it worked, and he drove me to where my friend was waiting. The entire time, I had to keep reassuring him that I was not mad and that I was happy he chose me. Anyway, I was safe and unharmed, except for some bruises from when I tried to fight him off earlier. He's now in jail. Please like and subscribe for more videos like this. Thank you. Growing up, I was always wary of my uncle on my dad's side of the family. Even as a young child, I just knew that I didn't like being around him. He never gave me any reason to feel this way, and I never voiced it to anyone. As I grew older, my family moved away, and I saw less of him, but anytime my extended family met for holidays, I would see him and avoid him. I was around 12 or 13 when my parents sat me and my older brother down and told us that my cousin had been molested by him from a young age. This had all come to light when my aunt caught it happening. We later found out she was abused by him, too. I really wish my gut feeling hadn't been right about that one. When I was a young woman, my husband and I lived on a military base. At the time, the base was wide open, and many local people used it as a shortcut from one town to another. One day, the newspaper said that facilities engineers were going to begin installing attic fans in our townhouses. Sure enough, someone banged on my door later in the week and announced that he was there to install my attic fan. I was immediately suspicious. The man was dirty, had a scraggly beard, and wore paint-stained clothes. But what alerted me mostly was my dog's reaction. Candy was a husky shepherd mix, so not a small dog. She put herself between me and him as best she could. Her hackles were up, and she was growling that deep-in-the-chest growl. I asked to see a work order and ID. He said, "I don't need no f***ing work order," and yanked open the screen door. It was latched, but those kinds of latches are meant to keep toddlers and dogs in, not grown men out. Candy roared and went for his throat. He jumped back and slammed the screen. I grabbed Candy, dragged her back, slammed and locked the door, and ran to the back. Then I called the military police. They came out, verified that my street was not due to get attic fans for a couple of weeks, and took all the information I could give them, which wasn't much. I never heard anything back, so they probably never identified him. 2 or 3 weeks later, the real installers came in uniform. They promptly produced work orders and ID. Candy just looked at them and went back to playing with the baby. I'm absolutely certain that Candy saved my life. My sister-in-law was a high-level executive at her company. She introduced me to her boss, the CEO. At that moment, I knew they were having an affair. No outward signs, just my intuition. She was married to my wife's brother, and when I told my wife, she said I was nuts. A few months later, we learned I was right. She filed for divorce and went on to marry her boss. I was 5 and walking with my mom to visit a friend. We were going to have lunch and see her new kitten. We walked up the driveway and my mother stopped to look at the front of the house. She noticed all the windows facing the street were closed with the curtains down. Very unusual for her friend, who enjoyed watching birds at the feeders placed throughout the yard. She quickly picked me up and began walking back down the driveway. I protested that I was hungry and wanted to see the kitten. My mom hushed me and carried me home. This was in the late 70s before cell phones. She called her friend several times and then called my father and asked him to check on her friend as she was worried. My mom was right to be worried. Her friend had been murdered by an intruder. He was never caught. Something about those closed drapes warned my mother away from that home and may have saved us from an encounter with an evil person. A few years ago, I was at a bar with my friends. Everything was good, we were drinking and having fun. All of a sudden, we heard this discussion taking place just a couple of tables from us. 2 guys were having a shouting match. I stopped everything to pay attention to them. My friends were making fun of me, saying I was gossipy. One of the guys in the discussion got up and left. Immediately after he left, I told my friends that we had to go, now. They didn't get why I was like that, but we've known each other forever, so they reluctantly agreed. We went to a different bar in another neighborhood, but I still couldn't take my mind off of those 2 guys. The next day, the news was talking about a bar fight. Apparently, the guy who got up went home, grabbed a gun, and came back for a drive-by. He killed 4 people in the process. It was 1995. I was 18, still living with my parents, and I was walking home from a friend's house at about 2 a.m. He only lived 5 or 6 blocks away, and we often hung out watching movies after I got off work. Usually, I would drive to his house, but this night, I had parked at home, and we walked to his place. When I was about halfway home, a pickup truck drove by with 2 guys in the cab and 2 in the bed. I immediately felt like I was in danger. I saw the truck turn the corner, and I dove over some hedges in the closest yard I could find. I hid under them. Then I saw the truck come back around the corner and slowly drive down the street. When it got to where I was hiding, I heard one of the guys say, "Where did he go?" And another responded that he didn't know. They kept driving and I didn't see them again. I stayed hidden for a good 15 minutes before getting up and running the rest of the way home. I'm certain they would have jumped me if they found me. I helped a victim of human trafficking get to a shelter. I was a medical student at the time. I noticed a patient in the ER who had a pretty bad injury to her face was with a sketchy-looking guy who was not related to her. She wasn't my patient, but I brought my gut feeling up to her doctor, who then made up some excuse to talk to the patient alone and got her to help. I never talked to her myself, but I couldn't shake the vibe I got from looking at her and the man she was with. I was driving uphill behind a flatbed truck carrying I-beams. I imagined them sliding off the truck and hitting my windshield, so I changed lanes. 2 seconds later, the I-beams were sliding off onto the road where my car would have been, sparking and gouging the pavement. To this day, I won't stay behind a truck with anything that's strapped down. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe to my channel for more Reddit stories. This is Reddit Story Hour. See you in the next video.